On today's episode, I have Erica Scott joining me. She is the founder of Civilian Connections, and if your organization is looking to hire anyone from the veteran community, she is your go-to resource. Erica, I wanted to thank you again for joining us on today's episode of the AZ BizLink podcast.
You're welcome.
I have loved you from the day that I've met you. You are a super inspiring woman here in the local business community, and I just would love to share a little bit more about your story. Would you mind maybe telling everyone a little bit more about what you're working on?
So right now I am working on starting my own business. I was in corporate America for over 20 years in HR, and I made the big leap. So I am turning something that was of service and I was passionate about into a business where I focus on getting our wonderful and amazing, talented veterans employed.
No, I think that's super insightful. And we actually had the opportunity to meet via AZ BizLink, which I think makes the story that much more special. And so you certainly are a service-oriented individual, as am I. And so could you maybe share just a little bit more about how you are providing services to those in the business community?
It's a great question. So like I said, I spent 20 years in HR, and I thought about how am I going to be of service? So I'm a civilian. I did not serve in the military. And so a lot of people ask, how did you get into this place where you work with veterans? So when I was in high school, standardized test time, I took this ASVAB test, and I did really well on it. And so the military was like, we want Erica Scott. And my doctor, unfortunately, was like, you can't go into the military. That's not something you can do. And so I remember being really sad about it. But I locked that away and I just focused on my future. But something deep inside me was like, I'm connected to the military. I feel like I need to give back to that community. So life moves forward. I started dating a gentleman in the Guard, and he got laid off. And he asked me a lot of questions. And I was really confused. I said, don't you have resources for that? Why are you coming to me? He said, I feel more comfortable coming to you. I don't feel like there'll be judgment. I feel like you'll be open to hear my story. So I thought there might be something to this. So I started volunteering with some nonprofits, and I found out I was really good. I was able to connect with veterans in an amazing way with just shared experiences, right? We've all been not confident, dejected, not sure, maybe misunderstood. I shared in that way, that shared experience of emotions. And from that forward, I said, you know what? I think this is what I'm going to do. I really started to look at what's going on with this transition gap. Like, how did this person come to me? And I discovered that 8 out of 10 veterans do not have employment lined up before they transition out. That is a lot of people who are looking for work, and about 70% of them are underemployed. When they go to find work, we're not using their skills. They could be nuclear scientists and they end up being technicians. They're in STEM, but they end up being, working in a convenience store. So there's something going on there. So I want to get with employers and say, hey, do you want to hire veterans? And a lot of them say, absolutely. So let's do this the right way. So let's uncover everything. Let's look at what you want to do, your skills, where's the business going, what are you looking for? And then I say, okay, this is the way to move forward to make yourself profitable, but to do well in the community, but I want you to do good too. So I just go in there and I create veteran hiring programs, really strategic, looking at 3 key components. So I look at 3 things that I've noticed that veterans talk about when they get these jobs. Sometimes they don't stay, and I wanted to look at that. And so I looked at, okay, so the first thing companies need to do is they need to look at their culture. They need to get really clear about why they're here, because veterans are obviously mission driven. They need to have a purpose. They need to have a mission. And then also you need to look at maybe some of the things that might come with veterans as they come into the workplace. That there are some things you may need to deal with. So looking at their leadership and going, are they prepared to support this individual coming into their community and coming into their business? So that goes into that diversity and inclusion part. What I found out is I was talking to a friend who was the veteran the other day, and he said, you know what? He's like, you have to look at what's the differences between the veterans and maybe some of the perceptions and misperceptions that come with hiring them, and then looking at your everyday employee. Once you hire one employee, there's some things that come with that too. So I think a lot of employers don't realize that a lot of people maybe are dealing with substance abuse, mental health issues, domestic violence. So some of the things that come with veterans and some of the things that come with employees, there's an overlap. So it's really not that different. So what's the difference here? Why do you want to hire veterans? Why am I so passionate about it? They're really loyal. Their unemployment is below what the national average is. They're way productive. Veterans are almost a combination of your innovators, your thinkers, and your leaders. That's one person, right? A company, they're 2.5 times more productive, and also they're there for the team. Their service over self. You give them a mission and a goal, they're going to get it done. So I work with companies to define that. So when they come into organizations, they can excel, but they also feel like they belong there too.
And I just want to clarify. So, do you help just employers here in the local business community, or do you also help individuals?
I focus on the employer because I think that's our biggest opportunity there. Sometimes veterans do get to me, so I will help them figure out where they want to go and what they want to do. But I focus on the employer side because a lot of the veterans are saying, I'm just looking for work. I need a job. I want to go somewhere where they're using my skills and they have good culture and they pay me well. So they're looking for all these components. I'm like, you know what, let me focus on the employer, make sure they have those things because those are all things that companies can do, but it's veteran centric.
We've highlighted a number of different great organizations from the business community at our AZ BizLink events and on some of our panels. And I would say the majority of them do have hiring initiatives for hiring veterans from our local business community. So I'm curious, are there any companies that really stand out to you that are doing it exceptionally well to recruit that talent?
That's a great question. So one of the things I'm a curious person by nature. If I don't know something, I'm going to go find out. And I love to be in environments where people are different from me so I can learn from them. So there's a couple companies that I visited that do it really well. So I visited Chick-fil-A when I went to Atlanta, Georgia a few months ago. And they have tours and they go through and they tell you the history of the company. A lot of people don't realize the founder of Chick-fil-A is a veteran. And the first thing they did when they sat all of us down, these are civilians, is they recognized their veterans. And they created their own coin and they created their own culture. So the companies that really have it interwoven into their culture do really, really well. And it's almost like that's just how we do things around here. And another company I just discovered that's local to Arizona is Service King. When you go to their website, they have a special portal for veterans. They go through and they break it down. This is our mission. This is our goal. Our goal is to hire 500 military veterans and spouses. I think that's another opportunity people don't think about is the spouses. There's a great opportunity there because they have the same values as the veterans do, but also they bring that community to there. And so they bring their friends. So it's almost like free recruiting if you do it well. So that's another company that they have it front and center. It's defined. They have all of their jobs listed out and they've mapped them to the military skills and they've mapped it to a commitment to that community. So those are a few things. So I think it's really showcasing the what, the how, and the why, and then really what are you going to do about it. So that's a company that's front and center about it.
No, I think it's always helpful to identify a couple of companies that are doing it exceptionally well for us to learn from them. Some of the best ideas are borrowed, and that's traditionally what we like to do at AZ BizLink is just to provide an opportunity or a platform to borrow ideas from people that are doing it exceptionally well in whatever that category is. But I do agree, though it's very important that we have a diverse workforce, it's also very important that we integrate that into our overall culture within our organizations. I'm curious, are there any other national trends that you're seeing as it relates to this topic?
I'm seeing a lot of initiatives and a lot of programs around incentivizing employers to hire veterans. So the most recent I saw is the Department of Labor came out with something called the Vets Medallion. And it's almost like a designation. It's almost like a way to differentiate your company from everybody else, but you have all this criteria that you have to come up with. So some of the things that they're looking at is what percentage of your workforce is veterans? How do you retain them? I think that's a big key component of it. You can get people in the door. Are they staying? Do you have resources? Do you have resource groups for them? Do you have a dedicated HR person that's looking at your recruiting, your hiring, your staffing, and also taking a look at, are you doing the right thing? So of course they look at, do you have any claims? Did you get in trouble for anything? So I think it's getting to a point where they're trying to standardize some of the metrics we're looking at. And I think some of the companies that do it really well is they define what success looks like. You don't just say, hey, I want to hire veterans. What does success look like? Is it more veterans in leadership? Is it more veterans that are in different roles? Is it just diversity in our population? They lead with that goal, but I think there's some more agencies that are saying, hey, these are the companies that do it really well. And I think about 500 companies were recognized by the Department of Labor saying, hey, they met all this criteria and absolutely exceeded it. Let's showcase them and make that the forefront of what that looks like for our veterans.
That's so interesting. I've never heard of that, but that's great that they're doing that. You had mentioned recruitment. I mean, that's one component, but also the retention aspect of it. What do companies need to be doing differently for the veteran community to retain them?
Yeah. So I would say the mission and purpose. That's the forefront. That is the foundation of everything. There are a lot of businesses that don't have a mission and purpose, and that is, veterans need that. I actually hired one of the company I used to work for, and that's what he sat down and asked me. He's like, what's my mission? What's my purpose? What's my goal? I'm like, okay, here we go. So I would say you need to lead with that, but also making sure it's spreads across the company. It can't just be veteran centric. It's something that people wake up every day, they lead with that, and that's how they execute in their jobs. And that was another thing that Chick-fil-A did really well. So when the economy in the early 2000s kind of went south a little bit, they pulled everybody into a room and said, let's just be clear. Let's clarify. Let's redo everything. And once they did that, they brought the rest of the company in. And they just shared that. This is why we're here. This is what we're here to do. Obviously, Chick-fil-A, they're here to serve. You're here to serve. You're a servant leader. And they're like one of the few companies that didn't struggle, right? So I think that that's number one. And once you do that, you sit down with your leaders and go, okay, we're bringing this demographic in. We want to make sure that you have the tools to support these veterans. So what does that look like? Getting really clear about what does it look like when you're doing well? What does it look like if maybe you're struggling? What are some of the things that you want to accomplish? What are some of the things that I might intervene to support you? I think that a lot of leaders, when they, especially when you have a diverse workforce, sometimes they feel like they have to play detective. You don't have to play detective. Just have that conversation up front. So you can also build that into your workflow. Okay, so maybe you need more time off. Maybe you need this. You build that into where there's that relationship and partnership so you're not assuming. And I would say the other thing is the companies that do it really well is they create a community in the company. Okay, so the resource groups that I mentioned earlier that have that shared background, they have mentorship programs to where veterans, when they come in, and I would say anybody, anytime you get a new job, you get excited about having the job, right? But then you're like, okay, how am I going to do this? How am I going to get the kids from daycare? How am I going to? So there's all that stress that comes with that. And a lot of veterans I talk to, they're like, I got the job, but then I got in there and I freaked out. I didn't feel comfortable going into anybody. I didn't know anybody would understand me. So creating that community within those groups, and it starts at like a micro level, and then it just expands, right? And so then it becomes, this is just the way we do business. And a lot of companies that are recognized that are veteran-centric or get rewards, they're like, that's just how we do. That's just how we do things. And I think that's what you need to lead with, those three things.
I think it's very clear that you have certainly found your passion and you're so good at what you do. I thought the amazing thing was when we initially met one another, I've never heard of anybody in your type of role before. So you are certainly a blessing to the business community. And I'm hopeful that more people will take notice of who you are and how you can help. I'm curious, could you maybe clarify at what point should a company bring you in to help them?
I would say a company who's looking to have some diversity initiatives, they're growing, they're looking to bring in a certain skill set or talent that they've never had before, especially STEM. I was at a technology conference a few weeks ago, and they said that there's a labor shortage in Arizona with STEM. I said, so when they're looking at diversity and they're really looking to get that good foundation to move the company forward, they should call me. I will tell you that veterans will transform your organization in ways that you've never dreamed of. They are amazing. I'm like, I get passionate about it because it's just like there's a gift there. And I think that there's a talent of innovation that people don't think about. They're so team oriented and they're so goal driven. And the veteran that I hired they are your thinker, like I said, your innovator and your leader. He maps out strategy in 20 minutes. He pushed the entire organization forward way, way quicker. He had people transforming around him because he was the example. And people took notice of how he presented himself, the relationships he built, the ideas that he came up with. And like I said, there's a lot of people don't think, oh, military, they have skills, but there are people who are very gifted. And maybe were the outcast, or maybe weren't welcomed, or maybe they were different. They go into the military, and my job is to make sure they don't feel that way on the civilian side. So there's untapped talent in the military. I think that our vaccine for AIDS, our cure for diseases is all kind of come out of the military. We just need to kind of fine tune that and get with employers to help maximize that opportunity.
As leaders and change agents here in the local business community, I feel like we tend to surround ourselves with like-minded individuals. Are there any other individual consultants or companies that you think are doing exceptional work, but just need to build a little bit more awareness that we could help to share their story here on the platform of AZ BizLink?
You know, that's a good question. I would say the trend that I'm seeing in HR is a lot of companies are moving towards that mindfulness, looking at emotional intelligence. They're looking at those soft skills and saying there's ways to quantify that, because I think people are like, oh, there's no money in that. Why should we focus? We should just focus on the duties and the company and the job. But I think that, especially when you're looking at diversity and inclusion and you're bringing in different people, you need to have those soft skills of being relatable and things like that. So mindfulness.org is a company that's local here. She actually came in and did some training for a group I'm a part of, and it really made me think about, how do I put myself out into the world? How do I inspire people? How do I lead people? And some of the best leaders I've ever had and best organizations are the people that leave legacies. Now, do they lead with that? No, they don't lead with that. But they're here to push you forward and make you feel uncomfortable. I had some wonderful mentors in my career that at the time they weren't my favorite people. I will tell you, like, why are you asking me to do this? Why are you asking me to work harder? Why are you asking me to think differently? That's really important. And I think companies are starting to see that, and they're starting to pull back from maybe the things they would give people. And there's a lot of articles, and there's companies that do it well, that balance out the soft skills and the hoverboards and the parties and the food and things like that. But they're getting back to, why are you here? Do you feel like you belong? Do you feel like you're a part of a bigger purpose? Do you feel like you're a part of the mission? Things like that. So they're really trying to get introspective more versus just looking at the business drivers.
So you're an entrepreneur. You have officially branched away from corporate America and started your own gig. I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned just for the general public. There's a lot of us that are thinking about doing it, but are fearful of taking that next step. Do you have any advice for those individuals that are currently thinking about it?
Wow, that's a good question. I would say, like any goal, I think, what did they say? A plan or a wish without a time date is something. It's not going to happen, right? I can't think of the saying, but I would say give yourself some time frame to say, I am going to make the jump this date. Okay, and then that's something else I learned from veterans. Get your goal and then go backwards, right? I think it's always going to be, you always want to be comfortable, right? And I was straddling that line between my 9 to 5 and trying to do this job because it made me feel a little uncomfortable leaving the security. So I would say get yourself a goal and then get yourself a mentor on the outside of what's going on that'll be really direct and honest with you about some of the things you're doing. And then I would say build your network. One of the things I did, and I'll tell myself a little bit that I stopped doing, is I stopped networking. And I think that when you start to do that, yes, you know people. Yes, you're going to have opportunities and make relationships for your business, but you kind of don't know what's going on. You start talking to people like, I didn't know that was going on. That's a part of networking. It's a part of getting in front of people who are moving the economy forward. So you can talk to those people and get in their head. So I would say those are the 3 things that I would say if you're thinking about making the jump. And then also I would say find something you're passionate about. Find something that when you get out of bed, you could talk about it for 12 hours. And people are like, I want you to stop talking. I get what you're saying. That's something that really makes you go, what problem am I trying to solve? How am I trying to help people? When I look back, is this where I want to be at this seat and this thing? And there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you want to do. But if you're really wanting to make change, I would say let that little gremlin in the back of your head say that you can't do it. Just have that thing take a back seat. Somebody's waiting for you to step forward. Somebody's waiting for you to be unabashedly yourself. And that's what I learned when I'm an entrepreneur. You have to put yourself out there, right? You have to get comfortable with maybe the things that'll come with that. Somebody's waiting for me to do that. And when I do it that way, someone's like, you know what, you really inspired me. I'm going to do that. So that's what I would say.
And I'm glad you brought that up. One individual shared with me, gosh, if you could only make an impression or help one person in this world, you're making an impact. And so for me, for the longest period of time, I was always fearful of who's going to actually listen to me? Who's going to want to work with me? And if we can slowly start helping just 1 or 5 or 10 people, it does go a long way. And people do want to hear it and they do want to listen. So I encourage people not to be afraid to start. That's a huge part of it. Just get started. So for those individuals that are trying to navigate the hiring process, maybe even for some of those veterans that are looking to get hired by some of these employers, do you have any tips on what they should include in their resume or what can help them to stand out to really showcase their expertise or knowledge or the lessons learned from their experience in the military?
Yeah, that's, as I learned that, as I looked at 100 resumes from veterans, I would say the couple things they need to do is veterans are so humble. They're like, oh, I did this and it's no big deal. When you talk to them, you're like, that's a humanitarian effort. Why don't you talk about that? I would say the things that you do well, if you speak different languages, if you've been in different cultures, if you say, you need to lead with that. Like I have friends who speak Korean and Chinese and it's way down at the bottom of the resume. I'm like, no, it's the first thing you need to say if you speak all these different languages because that's a value. So I would say you have to showcase the things that maybe you don't think are unique, but you have to kind of look and go, what are some of the things that I did that nobody else knows? And I would say they need to get really good at translating the military speak. I think that one of the things that HR people do is we kind of shut down because we don't understand. And one of the head of SHRM, the organization that I'm certified with, he actually did a panel a few weeks ago. And he said, what are the things they're struggling with? Something's happening with the resume and the translation and the interviewing. So I'd say you need to get really clear about not using that speak and kind of translating. And there's all kinds of tools online and things like that. And I would say thirdly is find somebody who's going to prep you and interview you and get you ready for sitting across from an HR person, or maybe the recruiter who's just trying to fill roles. Tell your story. I think sometimes I would do mock interviews because I volunteered for a nonprofit, and I would interview them, and they would just kind of go through and they tell me stuff. I'm like, tell me the story. Tell me the situation. Tell me what you did. Tell me what action, and then tell me what happened. The story, I think there's strength in the stories, and sometimes they're hesitant to say that because they're like, oh, maybe that's something they don't care about. It shows resiliency. It shows that you're diverse. It shows that you're committed. It shows that you're quick on your feet. It shows all of those things. I can deduce that from your story, but I think your story is your resume too.
I also want to spend a little bit of time just getting to know you and share your story with the rest of the business community. So when you're not so busy working on your passion project, how do you spend your time?
I'm like one of those little bobbleheads that's on wheels or something, because I just love people and I love to be curious and I love to learn. I immerse myself in that. And some of it is my geeky nature. I love going to Comic-Cons, and a lot of people don't know what Comic-Cons really are. They think they're like superheroes and comic books and dressing up. No, they have classes about learning different languages, doing voiceover work, working with diverse communities, women in engineering. They have all these different classes and panels where you can learn about people who are going through these things. So I sit myself right in that little room and I don't know what's going on and I just listen, right? The other thing is I picked up the violin 3 years ago because I always wanted to play a violin, and my mom was like, no, you're not going to play that. That's too loud. Take it back to school. But I was always really passionate about that. So I picked that up, and the teacher actually told me is learning things as an adult is better because your attention span is more committed, right? You're paying for this now. And then the other thing is I studied Russian. So when I kind of had to let go of going into the military, and your subconscious, you're like, I'm not ready to let this go. I'm still going to do this. I picked up Russian, so I can speak a little bit of Russian.
You're super impressive, that's for sure. Even though my attention span may be a little bit better now that I'm an adult, I still don't think I could play the violin. So kudos to you on that one. You had mentioned SHRM and some other organizations. Are there any other networking organizations or conferences or books or blogs that you often look to get some content that sets you up for success?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things. I try to keep it diverse. I try to keep a little bit of the technical and maybe some of the journals and some PhD stuff, but I also try to balance it out, making sure I'm getting the voice of the veteran. So I'm certified with the Society for Human Resources Management Professionals.
It's a mouthful.
That's a mouthful. That is an organization that focuses on HR, some best practices, networking. I don't know how to do an investigation. Some of those tactical skills you have to have as an HR professional, I'd highly recommend getting certified with them. I'm also certified with we love our acronyms in HR. What is going on? The Human Resources Certification Institute. You can get certified to demonstrate you have a body of knowledge. So I'm certified with them. So I have to get continuing education credits for that. And then I just keep myself really connected to some nonprofits, Hiring Our Heroes, and then Hire Heroes USA. And then there's also another one called Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. I am an acronym person. I'm just going to accept that. There's a lot of those. But that's a nonprofit out of New York where they do an annual survey where they ask veterans, what's going on? What was your transition like? What's going on in the community that concerns you? Did you have a job? So I try to balance out the strategic part of HR because that's what I go into companies and do, but also making sure I'm dialed into that community of what's going on because I'm just an advocate. I don't speak for them.
So we are getting close to the end of the year, and with the end of the year brings the new year. Mm-hmm. And with the new year, we tend to have New Year's resolutions or putting together our business plan or game plan for 2020. What does that include for you?
It's includes a little bit of everything and being anywhere and everywhere to make sure I'm leading a voice to this, my mission and to veterans. So I'm working with a friend of mine in Atlanta. It's funny because I feel like I'm a little bit country and a little bit rock and roll a little bit. And I'm in this magazine. It's like a music magazine or whatever. And I'm like, this is so fun to me. So I'm looking at putting myself in situations where veterans aren't represented, like South by Southwest and things like that, and really getting in front of communities that maybe don't know. I think a lot of people don't know what's going on with veterans and why should we care? So really traveling a lot. And then also, I want to get back into my Russian. People say, oh, say something. And I say the same 2 sentences every time because that's all I remember. I don't remember how to conjugate all those verbs. So getting back into kind of feeding my soul and feeding the things I get passionate about. Getting back into that, and then always probably exercise too. Doesn't everybody have exercise on their New Year's list?
I think we all do, and we always have the best of intentions. But yeah, I know we'll all have to get back into our exercise routines once Thanksgiving and Christmas is over.
Mm-hmm.
All that good food. Speaking of good food, I'm a little bit of a foodie, so I'm curious. Do you have any favorite restaurants that you love to go to here in the community?
Oh my, look at that question. Well, fun fact about me, there's a show on PBS called Check Please, Arizona. I was on the first season of that show.
Little fun fact there.
Fun fact, because I'm a foodie too. I would say I like to shop local businesses. There's a barbecue place called Little Miss Barbecue that I really, really love. And there's a coffee shop in Gilbert called The Coffee Shop. How could I forget that name? And then also I'm into like independent, like there's a place called The Lux on Central. I love places like that because, I mean, I think I have an affinity for anything with DJs in them. So, because again, that brings a certain type of person in there. So I get around, see people, how they function, what they're listening to. I'm like, I know what's going on.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I like that one. There are a lot of individuals that continue to move into the Valley on a regular basis. I mean, Arizona, the Phoenix market, we're a melting pot. We have people coming in from all over the country on a consistent basis, and our population is continuing to expand pretty rapidly. Mm-hmm. What would you say individuals would be kind of surprised to know or hear about living here in Arizona?
I would say that they'd be surprised that, well, first off, I travel to Georgia a lot, and a lot of people on the East Coast still think that we're like horse and buggies and what. So I'm like, they're like,
you mean we're not?
Like you ride a horse on the free? I'm like, no. Like, what are you guys doing? I think they would be surprised at how beautiful it is here. I have a friend who has a landscaping design. He's all into plants, and he's a veteran as well. And the what he's taught me about plants and flowers and wildlife and what nurtures the earth and like how people bring plants and food from different states and how bad that is, right? I think people don't realize how dynamic our mountains and our sky and our life here is. It's just beautiful. It's not cactus. So Arizona, I would say, and we don't have natural disasters here, even though it's pouring rain here for the past 2 days. We don't have natural disasters here, but also I think it's a great place to build a community, and I think we have a vibrant technology. We're going to be a tech hub. We've got a bunch of companies coming here. I think we're going to start being the leaders in that because people want to live here. It's a great place to be, and they also want to build businesses here. So
absolutely. So as a female leader, what advice would you give to other female leaders that maybe are just starting off in their careers?
Ooh, if I could think back to myself, because I think back to when I started and I was in leadership and in female, I would say that you have to find your voice and you don't have to be something that you're not. This actually came up at DragonCon. There was a young lady who stood up, and it was a panel about STEM, and they're talking about how do we get more women into STEM. And there were a couple of things I discovered there. Is like when we find young girls who are talented in science, we just like load on them, and it adds pressure. So she's like, that was too much pressure, and I can't be myself in this company. So we kind of had to give her some advice, and we told her, you know what, you have to find what's unique to you. Because when you become somebody else or you become a canned version of something, it's just not going to work for you. It's almost like she's like, I feel like I'm kind of eroding on the inside out and I'm losing my identity. And that was the word that really struck with me. You cannot lose your identity. And we told her, I'm like, you have to play the game. You have to go work for somebody and do things like that. But there was one lady who was an attorney. And she said, you know, when the X-Files came out, she's like, that was the best thing for me because the lady, she came in her suit, but it was sci-fi and it was fun. Find your identity and lead with that and never play small and be loud, take up space and put your voice out there because I will tell you, like I said, when I've done that, I've changed people. People really hear me and they like, okay, what am I going to do different? I didn't know that. So people are more apt to listen when you're your authentic self.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm pretty sure everyone who's listening to today's podcast wants to become your new best friend. So if they want to become friends with you, how can they find you?
I am, my website is www.civilianconnections.com. My email is erica.scott@civilianconnections.com. And I'm all over social media. Usually my handle is Civilian Connections. So I post some fun stuff on Instagram. You'll be able to see my Comic-Con stuff. And I go to Afropunk. You'll be able to see that. But you'll also be able to see a balance of that as well. So.
And I have one more subtle plug. So we do have our new Resources for Growth publication that's coming out in January. Very excited about that one, in which Erica will be featured in there with a number of other phenomenal great resources and contacts with local business communities. So Erica, thank you again for for joining me today.
You're welcome.